Hey everybody, what's up? Welcome back to Listography. Jason, Joe, and Kramzer here. Today we are ranking the 19 studio albums of the boss, Bruce Springsteen. Long, storied career, lots of albums to talk about. You guys want to do a quick intro, general thoughts on Bruce?
Just come out and say it so everyone knows right off the bat that you don't really like Bruce Springsteen that much.
I don't, but it's not like the Police. I don't not like Bruce, and some of his albums I really do like, but as far as like the way the general public feels about him and the way like his diehard fans feel about him, I nowhere close to liking him that much. He's kind of hit or miss for me. Some of his albums are great. Some of his albums I really can't stand. So yeah, it's kind of a take it or leave it kind of thing with Bruce's albums for me.
I kind of understand that. I obviously like him a great deal. He is among my favorites. I think when his sound is on, it's tremendous. I think he's a great songwriter. Although when you listen to all 19 of these, I think some of his songs kind of get recycled towards the end, and there's probably a batch of 13, 14 songs that are interchangeable. I don't think he has a lot of terrible songs, but when he does, they stick out like a sore thumb, and they're very kind of cringy. So that's the shadow of Bruce, but I think he's amazing. I think he has this terrific idea of blue-collar patriotism, a really cool heartland voice. I think he's had a lot of really good material from different decades and, a lot of different eras. He's done like that very country-ish prairie sound. He's done a more anthem, stadium rock sound. He's done a lot of different versions, so I'm a big fan.
Yeah, I really like Bruce. And I think, unlike Jason, I feel like his floor is still pretty good. Even his worst albums, I think, are worth listening to. It's a little tough when you're doing 19 in a row, though. That you can kind of see where that would start to grate, especially kind of in the middle. But I do like the way he kind of, he has the album with the E Street. He has the solo stuff. He has the acoustic kind of stripped down, real bare stuff. So, for the most part, I think he stays interesting. I think his songwriting and lyrics kind of stay pretty good for the most part. There's some ebbs and flows to that, but I think he's a pretty, he's one of the greats. Critics love him. People love him. I've never seen him live. That might I read that he's his shows are some of the all-time greats, but I never got to see him live. Never really listened to one of his live albums either, so could be some of the arrangements could be different, and maybe I'm missing out on some of that, and that would increase his standing in my eyes. But I already think he's pretty great, so I don't really need extra reasons to like him.
All right, before we jump into the ranking, just want to say, since there's 19 albums and all three of us are participating today, we're gonna do 3 at a time from 19 and through 11, and then we'll do album by album for the top 10 when we get there. But Cram's going to start us off with his bottom 3.
Yes, and the bottom is a pretty heavy rock bottom for me. I agree with Joe that I don't think his floor is that low, but this one is to me. Number 19, Human Touch. I really think it just is this really bad, saturated, lame, soft rock kind of effort. It's weird that he released this on the same day as Lucky Town, which kind of has a similar sound, but the quality is just night and day. Lucky Town will show up later for me. There's 14 songs on this album, I think. Human Touch is probably my favorite. I know Jason hates it. It is absurdly long for an opener and for a pop song. And then after that, there's absolutely nothing really worth mentioning. 57 channels is god awful. My number 18 is going to be Wrecking Ball. I don't have many songs on here that I like. We Take Care of Our Own and Jack of All Trades are okay, but it's just got no grit. It's got this bad pop version of downbeat, just kind of stomp beats, and it plays almost like a really bad stadium country album. I don't really care for it. And then my number 17 is going to be We Shall Overcome, all of the Seeger covers, which I just kind of find a little bit goofy and uninteresting. And when you're doing covers, when you're taking the pen and paper out of Bruce, you're taking a big part of Bruce Springsteen out of the magic. So those are my 19, 18, and 17.
Well, yeah, I think you nailed it on Human Touch. That is also my bottom, number 19. Maybe I didn't hate it as much as you. It's just so kind of anonymous sounding that there's really nothing to grab onto. I also, at number 18, I'm going to have Working on a Dream, which just does nothing for me. And then 17, the counterpart to Human Touch, I have Lucky Town. Both of those are they're forgettable, anonymous. Just the sound. I don't like the production. It's that like 90s kind of doesn't work for me for a Bruce Springsteen album at all.
All right. My number 19 is Wrecking Ball. I really, really hate it. Cannot stand a second of it. He's doing a lot of this like Dropkick Murphys inspired Celtic rock. And there's also some like hip hop influence and R&B kind of thing happening on a couple tracks. And then there's mariachi horns on songs. It's a total mess. I have no idea what's happening, and the songs aren't very good. And my number 18 is High Hopes. Again, just a mess of a record. I don't know. The songs aren't good, and Tom Morello's just basically taking a dump all over them. It's terrible. My number 17 is going to be Human Touch, which you guys pretty much nailed it. Really sort of bad production and extremely bland songs. Wrecking Ball and High Hopes really grate on me, and I really can't stand them. Human Touch is more like ignorable and forgettable. So not quite as bad as the other two, but yeah, not good.
All right. My number 16 with Joe, I've got Working on a Dream. There's nothing glaringly bad about it, but it is very forgettable. So forgettable that I kept, when I was writing down my list, was like, why do I only have 18 written down? What the hell am I missing? And I had to like double look and go back and be like, oh yeah, I was working on a dream. Feels just like The Leftovers from Magic, which I think is pretty good album. This one just doesn't have any life to it. Seems recycled. I really don't like Outlaw Pete at all. I feel like that was just so lazily put together. Number 15, I've got High Hopes. I do like it a little more than Jason, although I hate the electric version of Ghost of Tom Joad. But I do kind of like that there's a little bit more rhythm and variety than the albums leading up here. And then number 14 is kind of where I'm doing a cutoff on albums that I think are pretty good. And this is his newest one from 2019, Western Stars, which I think is a pretty decent album. It's, got that classic American West feel. Nothing that he wasn't really doing before, but I do think it kind of has some of his best arrangements maybe since The Rising. And that's kind of when he's at his best, is when he does simple songwriting, kind of lets the arrangements put a lot of the icing on the cake. Chasing Wild Horse is a pretty good song. I like Hitchhiking, but I think it's a terrible opener. So that's going to be 16, 15, 14.
Okay. Well, for my 16, I got Wrecking Ball, which Jason hated. And it's not great. It was given 5 stars by Rolling Stone. I thought I would point that out. Honestly, Rolling Stone loves Bruce Springsteen. Like, all his new albums are like 4.5, 5 stars. It's kind of weird. Kind of threw me off when I was looking at that. It's not a great album, but I don't hate it. I think it's kind of interesting. Number 15, I got the Seeger Sessions, which I actually kind of enjoyed. I like his his lively takes on some of these classic protest and folk songs. The arrangements are pretty good. I like it. And 14, I got Devils and Dust, which is kind of a stripped down, kind of in the vein of Ghost of Tom Joad. But, nothing, there's nothing on here that I really would just like glommed onto. There's some decent songs, but nothing great for me.
My number 16 is The Rising. Feel a little bad shitting all over his 9/11 album, but it's not very good. The songs are just about as boring as the ones on Human Touch. The production's not very good either. Number 15, I've got Working on a Dream, which, as you guys said, is kind of forgettable as well. I do not like the production on any of his albums, basically, after the 90s. I think they all sound really sterile. I don't know how he recorded them, but they all sound like the worst version of like what digital recording is. And there's certainly albums recorded digitally that sound great, but his are not that. They all sound really bland to me. And number 14, I have We Shall Overcome. I appreciate Pete Seeger and his songwriting, and I appreciate that Bruce did this record. They're not bad. It's kind of enjoyable, but I'd rather hear other people do these songs than Bruce.
All right. Still can't get over the fact you have the rising that low. Okay. Let's get to number 13 for me, which is going to be Lucky Town. Alluded to this earlier, kind of the companion piece to Human Touch, but it's almost like he had 30 songs and just divided them up to good and bad. Like, that's kind of how I hear it. I think Lucky Town is pretty decent. It's not like all those sappy love songs that are sort of on Human Touch. It's a little more mature and focused. I think Local Hero is pretty good. I like Better Days. My number 12 is going to be Devils and Dust, which I actually like a good bit. Joe's right. It has that more stripped down, just kind of acoustic forward. I think the first half of the album is really good. It's got kind of that grittier prairie cornfield sound to it. I can almost picture every song being like a music video in front of a silo with like a pickup truck in the back, which is always kind of weird how he even kind of changed his accent later. Like, he kind of made up his own Midwest accent and it just always was kind of weird. And then number 11, before we get into the top 10, is going to be an album that was pretty hard for me to keep out of the top 10. I'll probably get some heat for this one, but I've got The Wild, The Innocent, and the E Street Shuffle at number 11. I like it. I think it's too much of the E Street Band. It's a little bit overblown, and I think the second half is much better. Songs are just a bit too long. I think some of the writing just kind of gets lost, just kind of loses my interest level with the backup band kind of taking over. I do absolutely love Rosalita and New York City Serenade. I do like it as an album. I just love a lot of his albums, so the 10 I just find better. I still appreciate this album a good bit.
That's concerning to me. I think I like the E Street Band better than Bruce in a lot of cases, but to each his own. Also, the reason I don't like Devils and Dust, I was looking at my notes, it's because he kind of wants to be Bob Dylan on this album really badly, and he kind of even starts to affect that kind of vocal pattern, and didn't love it. On to my 13 to 11, and this might upset some people. I have at number 13, not this one, High Hopes, which I kind of like. I like American Skin, 41 Shots a lot. I like the opener High Hopes, just like Firewood. This is kind of like all his songs that didn't make some of his 2000 and 2010s albums. It's not really quite an album. It's more like just picking songs. And I love Tom Morello, so I don't mind his presence on this one. Number 12, I got Tom Joad. I don't know. I kind of struggled to put this one because it does have some good songs. I really like Youngstown, like Tom Joad. There's some good stuff on here, but it's just too kind of quiet and soft, and I don't think it holds up well against something like Nebraska. And then it has maybe the worst album cover of all time. So that really kind of, it is the worst. It's like the first day of Photoshop being invented, and like they just went in when we're playing with all the settings. It's god awful. He has some really bad album covers. Lucky Town, Human Touch. I don't know who his creative director is, but he needs a new one.
Human Touch, like everything you need to know about, just like, yeah, I'm
this
not gonna
weird stretch font. It's like, who did this? Why? It was probably Bruce himself. But anyway, my number 11, and this is the upsetting one for a lot of people, but I just do not like this album much. Tunnel of Love is my number 11, which it seemed like everyone liked. All the critics love it. I just do not like the sound, the production. He's missing the E Street Band, in my opinion, here. I think most of his solo stuff is not as good as when he has the E Street. He can't really carry it. I read somewhere where you have to be married and divorced to really appreciate this album, which maybe I'm not there yet. So maybe in a couple of years I'll like this one more. But Tunnel of Love, not doing it for me.
See, I think Tunnel of Love is the worst album cover, but it's also brilliant because it's just like, this is my midlife crisis album, and here's me with like a nice outfit and combed hair, and I'm sitting in front of a convertible or whatever. It's like a glamour cover.
It tells you exactly what you need to know, like about Bruce's state of mind at that moment. So I dig that album cover.
I think Tunnel of Love is actually one of his best album covers. I like it. But for my 13 through 11, 13 I have Devils and Dust, marginally better than The Rising. I like sort of the quieter, more acoustic tracks on this record. When this record sort of rocks out a little with the full band, think the production sounds awful. The kick drum sounds like a piece of cardboard. 12 and 11, I'll talk about these ones together. I've got Greetings from Asbury Park, New Jersey, and Wild, Innocent, and E Street Shuffle. I want to like these albums more than I do, and they're close to being good. Musically, I like them a good bit, but I really can't stand the lyrics on it particularly. He's like, I don't know, he's young and ambitious, and he's like trying way too hard. He's making like every other word rhyme. I don't know what he's doing. It seems super forced, pretentious. Yeah, I don't know. Sorry, I know a lot of people love these records that I just do not.
All right, let's get into the top 10. My number 10 is going to be Magic, which I think is a pretty good, or it's a really good return to form for someone that, you know, is 30 years into their career. It's got a lot of the older elements of old Bruce that hadn't been around for 6-7 albums leading up to this, especially in a song like Living in the Future. Really sounds like it could have been on Born to Run or a lot of those other albums. It's got the old sax and bells. This album is kind of electric guitar forward, which is kind of a breath of fresh air. Hadn't really done that in a while. Really youthful sounding. Radio Nowhere is a nice little opener. I think the middle part of this album is great. I love Living in the Future, Your Own Worst Enemy, Gypsy Biker's Good, Girls in Their Summer Clothes, I'll Work for Your Love, and then Magic. Really nice, just good heart of the order chunk of the album. I'm not crazy about some of the songs at the tail end, but as a full listen, it's just really impressive. And we've been talking a lot about that with a lot of artists coming out with later period records that just feels really good when they come out with something that's just pretty good all the way through. Just classic Bruce vibes and talent done pretty well.
Also, my number 10, we're on the same wavelength with this one. This is, he got Brendan O'Brien to produce this one, and I think he kind of kicks up the rock a little bit after kind of the stripped down Devils and Dust. And this one just, it rocks. I mean, the first 7 or 8 songs, it's just real lively. I think Bruce sounds good. I think he sounds rejuvenated. It's just a really good kind of, you know, again, this is this is 34 years after his debut. And, you know, it's just impressive when someone with that kind of miles on him can put together an album like this and just sound lively and kind of into it. There's some nice sax on here. The guitar sounds good. I think it's produced well. The last 4 tracks maybe drag a little bit, but everything before that, Magic, I'll Work for Your Love, Radio Nowhere, You'll Be Coming Down, all just solid kind of good songs. It's just a good effort by Bruce here with Magic.
Okay, my number 10 is Lucky Town. It kind of blew me away. I think the first time maybe that I listened all the way through Human Touch and Lucky Town. And I mean, I was aware that they were released on the same day, and I just couldn't believe how much better Lucky Town was. All the songs on it are pretty solid. It does suffer still from that early 90s production, but compared to Human Touch, it's way, way better. And it actually sneaks a track into my top 10 Bruce songs, which we'll get to in tomorrow's episode.
Very nice. Yeah, as far as that sound goes, you know, I feel like we've kind of covered that with other artists in that like late 80s, early 90s period. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I think like with Oh Mercy with Bob Dylan is a classic example of getting it right, but when it's not right, it can go so wrong. And I think on those albums, they didn't really get it right, but on Tunnel of Love, they probably did, and I'll talk about that later. But my number 9 is going to be Greetings from Asbury Park. I know what Jason's talking about when he's talking about this style being overblown with this and Wild, Innocent, E Street Shuffle. Pretty contrived lyrics, overdone. He is trying too hard. There's too many rhymes when there doesn't need to be. The songs will be kind of perfected and his voice will be perfected on Born to Run, where mainly just because things breathe a lot more. I think that's kind of the big thing. I also am not crazy about the mix on this. It's just very weak and soft and kind of cloudy, but there's no doubt this album is meeting Bruce and you get his style, his subject matter, his character. So I think it's a great introduction, and there are really good songs on it. I love Lost in the Flood, Growing Up, Blinded by the Light is good, The Angel. It just does sound like right now he's like, I want to be Bob Dylan, I want to be Van Morrison, I want to be all these things, and he just does it a little too much. Once he relaxes, a few albums later, he's going to nail it. But I do think this is a pretty good debut.
For me, I got my number 9 is going to be The Rising, his first effort after Goes to Tom Joad, and first with the E Street Band since Born in the USA, I guess. So It's a big break for them. But this one, this is after 9/11, and I think it really holds up. I think The Rising, in particular, the song is really just great. I think he really kind of captured America, at the moment after kind of, what is America after 9/11? I think it's very poignant. I think it starts off, big and robust with Lonesome Day Into the Fire, Waiting on a Sunny Day. You can really kind of feel the questioning, what's America's role? How do we survive this? And I think he just kind of nails it. I think the E Street Band adds, the sound that I want back in. Some reflective moments. It's uplifting, joyful at times. It's depressing at times. I think it's just a really strong album, maybe a little too long. And Let's Be Friends, Skin to Skin is not a good song at all. But other than that, take that out, I think you have a pretty darn good album with The Rising.
All right. My number 9 is The Ghost of Tom Joad. Pretty enjoyable listen. I don't know. I struggle with how good of a songwriter Bruce is. Like, I have trouble deciding, because a lot of times when I really like Bruce, my favorite Bruce stuff, it comes down to the arrangements. I think when the arrangements are good, he's great, but I think he needs those strong arrangements to elevate his songs to the level of greatness. And when it's really stripped down, like on this record in Nebraska, I don't know if it's really that great. I like the sort of the mood and the atmosphere, but I don't know if the songs are really strong enough to stand on their own like that all the time. I enjoy this record when I'm listening to it, but after it's over, I don't find it to be that memorable or wanting to go back to it that much. So it lands in the middle for me. We're kind of getting up towards the stuff that I enjoy, though.
I think he's a pretty darn good songwriter, and I think he's really authentic with his voice, and especially with his subject matter and what he has to say.
That's actually maybe what I don't like. I feel like he's phony all the time.
Oh God, no. I think that's complete opposite. I think he's down to earth and just telling you. I mean, there are exceptions to this rule, and there are some badly written songs. But I think to listen to Bruce Springsteen's song is to know Bruce Springsteen. Like, that's how I feel. You know what he's all about. You know what he cares about. But I see what you're saying with Tom Joad. That is my number 8. I almost had this much higher. Almost had it in like the 6 to 5 range. I think it suffers from too much of a good thing. I love how ghostly and haunting and quiet this album is, but it is just too much, and there's not enough variety. It kind of just drags you down by the end. The first half, I'm like really taken in, really attached to it, but it just kind of slowly chisels away at your patience a little bit. I think it just needs a little bit more pulse to it. I think there's a lot of really good songs. Ghost of Tom Joad, Straight Time, Youngstown. The Line is cool. The album is more memorable to me than in the feeling of it than the individual songs, but it is it's kind of like the descendant of Nebraska. It's just really reflective. A lot of songs just kind of like, are about like the death of the past, and journeys have all of a sudden felt meaningless. But I do think it's a pretty underrated album in the Springsteen catalog. I know critics and fans are kind of divided on it. And I don't think it was a great idea to kind of tour with it in really small venues and soft sounds and just kind of a quiet, more different take when, his live performances are so explosive and fun. To kind of go on the complete other end is admirable. But, if you're a laissez-faire Springsteen fan and you were like, oh, Springsteen's coming, and you went and saw, you'd be like, what the hell is that? So I don't know. I think that probably hurt him a little bit, but I do think it was kind of a cool tonal direction after Lucky Town and all of that, kind of just get to his roots a little more. And he feels kind of tired at this point in his career, but he knows it. And that's what kind of the songs kind of come about. And he'll have a big break after this before he gets back into more prolific album output. But I think it's a pretty darn good album, but it does suffer from just too much.
This is a tough one because it's probably his best written album for me, but it's just not. It's literally the opposite of what I want in a Bruce Springsteen album, even though it's very good. I'll give it that. I have Nebraska. Again, it's just basically just him. No E Street, him and a guitar, maybe a harmonica, just kind of, these are his stories. These are the stories of middle America, kind of beneath the headlines, sort of the everyday people. You have stuff like Nebraska and Atlantic City, Johnny 99, State Trooper. You can kind of tell just from the song titles what this album is going to be about. It's very kind of a little depressing. It's just him and just, this is Bruce. He puts together some of his best songwriting, and it would be higher, but it's just not the sound I love in Bruce. I think this is one you have to listen to like 4 or 5 times probably, which I didn't, because it just doesn't quite grab me. It's a good album. I can see why people like it, but it's just not for me.
You had it in the top 10, so it was a little for you.
Well, yeah, I mean, I want to like it more. Like, I feel like I'm going to go back and listen to it a couple more times. And the first time I listened to it, I had it much lower. And I listened to it again, and it rose a little bit. And then maybe on subsequent listens, it'll break the top 5 or something. But for now, it is what it is, Nebraska.
Number 8 for me is also Nebraska. You said this record's not for you. This record should be for me. This is exactly what I normally like. Like, everything that I love, that's what Bruce is doing on this record. And it still just doesn't really connect with me. I don't like the songs that much, with one exception. And I don't know, like, some of the songs with the fast strumming just really feel like he needs a full band. I don't know. I'm with Joe. I want to like it more than I do. I feel like it's right up my alley. It should be my favorite Bruce Springsteen record. And I don't know. I just don't like the songs that much.
Let's keep talking about Nebraska. I think my list is just stronger than you guys. I have number 7, but I like it considerably more. I'm probably much the biggest Bruce fan of the 3 of us. It is kind of the ancestor of Ghost of Tom Joad. And it's a pretty dark album. It's really desolate and bleak and dark. And there's kind of a lot of songs about crime and, like from Atlantic City. And it is kind of just about like a small town under the headlines, like Joe set up pretty well. But it's kind of like, these are the spots where the American dream is dead, and this is what life is like. And it is kind of a downer, but I disagree. I think this is a good example of when his stripped down sound does work, and I think the songs are pretty darn good. I do think his strength is when he gets that big arrangement sound with the band behind him, the band kind of being restrained and him kind of being elevated and them kind of meeting in the middle. And this obviously is just him, but I think it's pretty darn good. So number 7 for me is Nebraska.
Well, for me, and I kind of knew that Jason, which it hasn't popped on his list yet, and I kind of figured it would be higher up. For me, I got Western Stars as my number 7. I very much like this album. It's kind of romantic, intimate. Kind of reminds me of like Conway Twitty. A lot of strings. The arrangements are kind of grandiose in a country music kind of style, maybe like Glenn Campbell-esque. And I think as far as his songwriting goes, it's some of his best. There's no bad songs on this one, I don't think. It's all kind of, maybe he doesn't have like that really kind of attention grabber, but for me, like in almost 50 years past your debut, this is kind of the music that Bruce should have been doing. It sounds very authentic. It kind of fits him, fits his voice. And I think it's just really strong album. I'd like to see him do this a couple more times. I think it just, when you're that age, not to like take shots at aging rock stars, but when you're at that age, I think maybe a little less of the blustery kind of hard rock, a little more of the romantic kind of longing, yearning for the Midwest. Everything about the album, and I think it's produced really well, kind of fits the theme right on the cover. Western Stars, big horse on the cover, looking out, into the Grand Canyon or whatever. It's just kind of all fits for me. It all works. I really like it.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with everything you said. It's also my number 7. It's his best produced album in, I don't know, 30 years or something. I hate the way most of his late period records sound. This one's not so bad. I really like the horn and string arrangements. The orchestrations are really nice. Probably his most melodic songs in a long time too, which is good. I think it's a very strong late period effort. I don't necessarily want to see him do it more times. I think he should go out on top with this one because I think if he tries to do it again, it probably won't work.
It is kind of like his riding off into the sunset. It would be a really nice just career capper right now. That's it. You're done. Ride off on that horse into the sunset.
No, the next direction he's going is back to human touch. It's going to be like retirement living romance. It's going to be really good. Songs about, sharing your jello and stuff like that. We'll see. But all right. My number 6 is going to be Born in the USA. I think this is a pretty good record. My favorite thing about this record is that he probably could have just made a ton of money and made more just big stadium sounding stuff kind of like this. But he kind of just didn't ride the curtails and just did, whatever he really liked. I think this album suffers a little bit for now that we're in like the really top albums. I don't think he has a lot of filler on some of these, but I think this one kind of does. There's some songs that don't really do it for me here, like No Surrender, Working on the Highway, but I think the standouts on here are fantastic. Had a ton of big hits off of it. Born in the USA, Cover Me are great. I like Darlington County, love Dancing in the Dark, Glory Days, My Hometown, I'm on Fire is great. I just kind of love the commentary on this about, and I was reading about how it almost, I can't remember if it was the song Born in the USA or the whole album was almost called Vietnam, which would have just probably changed the perception and, the marketing and everything would have been just a lot different. But this is his first just big, straight up, this is my version of patriotism. Here's what it is. Here's what we're doing to the people of this country in some way. And, it's just a really good sounding album. It's got that giant heartland sound, and I like the way the vocals are mixed here. It's kind of started doing it on The Rising when it wasn't as muddled and there was a lot more pop and glimmer to the vocals. And I think it sounds really good. I do think some of the drums are a little bit over the top at times, but there's a lot of really cool rockin' life to this. A lot of good, just kind of danceable beats. Courtney Cox danced to it. I've danced to it. Pretty good album, and one of the biggest album sales of all time, I believe. So classic album cover. What more could you want?
Yep, that's a great album. It's higher on my list because I have at number 6 the debut, Greetings from Asbury Park, New Jersey. And all the kind of elements are here for his kind of breakout a little bit later. The songwriting is a little, I kind of get what you guys are saying. It's a little too much sometimes. He's maybe forcing it. The lyrics I'm blinded by the light are kind of like, you can kind of tell, maybe some of it's nonsense. He's just kind of talking. But I don't mind that kind of stream of consciousness, although I do really like the Manfred Mann version better. I think it really rocks. But I think the rest of it is pretty good. I mean, maybe a little lack of energy from the band here, a little more, I like so much what he does on his next album and the album after that this feels a little kind of too stripped back for me, but I think the songwriting's pretty good. Spirit in the Night, The Angel for You, I think the second half's probably better. I don't know, maybe not. It's all pretty good, really. It's kind of the stripped down essence of Bruce, the stripped down essence of the band. It's a good debut, but he would do, much better a little later. So it kind of pales in comparison to everything after this, really.
All right, my number 6 is Magic. Really strong set of songs. I think the arrangements are really cool, kind of going back to the early sound a little bit with the E Street Band. But I disagree with Joe. I think this record sounds like crap. It's just compressed to hell and sounds really bad to my ears. I wish it had a nice, warm vintage sound, because I think that these songs are, deserving of it. I think if it was recorded better and mixed better, this might be, top 2, because I think the songs are that good.
All right, getting into my top 5. We've talked a bit about this so far. My number 5 is going to be Tunnel of Love, and kind of how I think the production gets this right because it matches what the album's about. He's always done love songs. They're always kind of whimsical and hopeful. This one is like his first foray into just mature albums, and Joe was saying, you got to be married and divorced. It is kind of like his midlife crisis album, but I think he nails it, and I think it's really honest. It's really authentic. The only song I don't really like on it is the title track. I think it's just got too much of that 80s pop and production and leads with it, but I love Brilliant Disguise. I love One Step Up. I love Tougher Than the Rest. I think I love the way the drums sound on this album. It's got a really cool blend of 80s kind of pop and country and soft rock. He just does it really good. I like kind of how he narrowed his focus and came up with a smaller scale album after Born in the USA. Like I said before, he could have just went with that and made these really loud anthemic songs with giant choruses that everyone could clap to and sing along with, but he just kind of made the album that he wanted, and it's a really just nice, steady album, good sequencing. It's a bit long, maybe, but I just think it's pretty darn good, and I think the production matches the songwriting, and I think the songwriting is pretty underrated here. I think there's a lot of really good songs on it, and I don't know if they came in with the songs and produced around the songs, or if he really had a nice vision in mind, but whatever came together for this, it's a pretty darn good record.
I disagree, but that's the magic of Bruce. I don't know why I don't get that album. I was listening to it with high hopes about, this is, all the critics say this is his, kind of best, like stripped down, such a kind of follow up to Born in the USA, but a completely different sound. And it just, I don't know, didn't work for me. All right. Well, my number 5 is going to be The River. This is kind of Bruce moving from Jersey out to the Midwest. This is kind of the big, like, start of the Heartland rock, which, I don't know, I don't love that kind of sound, that Heartland John Mellencamp. I mean, I like it. It's just not kind of quite, doesn't hit me the same as Born to Run and Darkness on the Edge of Town. But I still think it's a good album. There's no weak tracks, which is impressive for, a double album, 83 minutes long. It has his first kind of big hit in Hungry Heart, which originally was going to be for the Ramones, which is weird. But this is kind of, his breakout, his first step towards superstardom. And it's just, The River's a nice kind of long sort of, it's kind of the start of his sort of that Heartland. Maybe things aren't as great as, people think they are. It's kind of a depressing story of having to marry someone and get a job, and sort of the rebirth of The River. But it's a really good album. It's just maybe it's moving away kind of from the sound that I really love as far as what Bruce and the E Street Band does. There's less solos, less Clarence Clemens, a little more Bruce being a Heartland rocker, which is fine. It's a great album, but not quite in my pinnacle, my apogee of Bruce Springsteen-ness.
All right, my number 5 is Tunnel of Love. I agree with pretty much everything Kram said about it. I do like the sound of it a good bit. I think the songs are pretty strong, underrated, a lot of good tunes, and I kind of feel the way maybe that Joe feels about The River. I do really like it a lot, but it's not pinnacle of what Bruce does or anything. Yeah, it's a good solid record, maybe simultaneously underrated and overrated. I think there's a contingency of people that love it and maybe rank it among his very best, and I think there's also people that either don't rate it highly or maybe have never even listened to it. If you haven't heard it, it's definitely worth a listen, but at the same time maybe not as great as some people think it is.
You're right with that objective analysis and how it's rated. Bruce fans are a weird spread, and like there are people that don't really like rock music, but they still like Bruce, and they'll go to his live shows, and there are country fans that like Bruce, singer-songwriter fans that like Bruce. I mean, he spreads out a lot. And I usually don't do this for our listographies, but I did research some like best of albums lists, some albums rankings, and they're all over the place. I've seen like 6 different number ones. I've seen classic albums, like flutter around 9 different spots. I saw a list that had Tunnel of Love number 1. So I get what you're saying, that, it's just really weird how kind of divisive some of his different stuff can be. Number 4, 3, 2, and 1 are all going to be perfect album scores for me. I love all of these albums. I will nitpick some small things, but all 4 out of 4 stars for me. My number 4 is going to be The Rising, which I think saying the production on this album is bad is completely irrational. Song to song, it does exactly what it needs to. I think the production on a song like Paradise is amazing. Joe kind of covered what it's all about with kind of the binding of the nation and the post 9/11 remorse. It's kind of the first album he's done where he's once again kind of the voice of the heartland and not doing something more personal. It's just like this big rally cry, and I think there's just an abundance of really good songs. I think Lonesome Day is great. It's got the spirit of the album right off the bat. It's all right, it's all right, it's all right. It's great. Mary's Place is great. You're Missing, Empty Sky, Waiting on a Sunny Day, The Rising, My City of Ruins. There's just a lot of really, really good songs. It's nice to have the Americana of E Street Band getting back together full force. I do want to tell a quick story because this is the only time I've seen Bruce live was at this tour, and it's back when I did not have a cell phone. It was probably a few months before I got a cell phone. It was like December of 03, and dial-up internet was still a thing, and I was on IM, so I was clogging the phone lines, and at like 6:40 in the evening, it was like a pounding on my front door, and it's my friend Matt. He's like out of breath from running up the stairs to my door, and he's like, my boss at work gave me 2 tickets at the Civic Arena to see Bruce Springsteen. It starts in a half hour. We gotta go now. We gotta go now. And he was like, why were you answering your phone? I was like, I was on the internet. So we went. The show was amazing. The only thing that sucked was he did 2 encores. In my head, I'm like, okay, he hasn't done Streets of Philadelphia. He hasn't done Rosalita. He hasn't done all this stuff. And because it was December, he closed with Santa Claus is Coming to Town. And I was like, God damn it. Like, it was just a little bit of a downer, but he's just terrific live. And seeing these songs live, he did probably 10 out of the 15 songs on this album, and it sounded great. And but I think even with that aside, I think The Rising is a tremendous album, and really cool that he'd gone 7 years without kind of doing a new album, and this is what it came up with. And it was like the country was like, we need someone to heal us, and he was like, he looked at the rest of the band and was like, we is this our job to do this right now? Yeah, it might be. So I think they did it, and I think it's a good album. I think it's a great album.
Yeah, I think maybe one of the best things about that album is it would have been really easy to go like jingoistic and like overly patriotic, like, you know, Toby Keith or something. And he didn't kind of fall into that trap. It's still very kind of, you know, America's great, but not because of the army and invading countries. It's great because of the individual people and, you know, how it affects us. So I think that's, you know, one of the stronger points of that album. But moving on to my list, at number 4, we got The Wild, the Innocent, and the E Street Shuffle. This is kind of like where it all comes together for Bruce, for me. I love kind of I think the storytelling's a lot better on this. It's less kind of, you know, sometimes a little word jumbly, you know, just spewing out on that first album. This, I think it really kind of, each song tells a story. 4th of July is where he parks, kind of, you know, very evocative of New Jersey with the fireworks. It's very kind of, you know, it's a strong story. The music's great. I really like Kitty's Back, kind of just a way for the E Street Band to kind of spread its wings and really like highlight the individual parts of the band. Something like Incident on 57th Street has, you know, again, it's just a strong story. All these songs or most of the songs are kind of epic. There's 4 songs over 7 minutes long. This is a great chance for the E Street Band to kind of just show what they are. Still has Bruce's kind of poignant, evocative storytelling, and it's, you know, more horns. I love the horns. I love Clarence Clemens. I wish he had more. Kind of, he's missing on the later albums for me, and I think he kind of gets maybe a little more time in the spotlight on this one than some of the later albums, and I really dig it. There's no weak songs. Rosalita Come Out Tonight's great. Incident on 57th Street's great. New York City Serenade is great. Just a really good album. Not quite a 10 out of 10. This is like a 9 out of 10 for me. This is kind of on the cusp of greatness, which of course would come a little bit later.
All right, my number 4 is Born in the USA. I guess this is kind of like his pop record in a way, but I think it's really good. A lot of really good songs. Even though it's maybe a more commercial sounding record, the production doesn't bother me. There are spots on the record where the snare is way too loud, but other than that, I think, you know, it's a good version of what pop rock in the 80s could be. All the hits are fantastic, and the majority of the other tracks are really good as well too. So it's a solid number 4.
All right, my number 3, I said the top 4 were going to be all 4 out of 4 stars, but I had no trouble placing them. Like, I'm confident 4, 3, 2, and 1 where they are. Number 3, one of the best follow-ups to a big critical hit, Darkness on the Edge of Town. You know, it was kind of like, what's he going to do after Born to Run? And this is a pretty darn good follow-up. I think it is very much in the same vein of Born to Run, especially with the sound. I do think that it is not quite as good, but I think where it's different is this album's kind of more about the feeling and less about the storytelling and the songwriting, which I think is kind of cool. It's a little bit, it's got these kind of moments and songs that are just kind of more, not experimental, but maybe just kind of more impressionist of like Something in the Night is kind of a different song for him at this time because it's just really about the mood and the feeling. And I love that song. It's probably my favorite on the album. There's just, I mean, of all the songs on it, they're just all really good. Badlands is great. Candy's Room is another song that I think he's kind of doing something a little different than he hasn't done yet. And I think it works. Promised Land is great. And man, what an album closer with the title track. I think it's just perfect. I think the sequencing is great and it gives you a great cohesive feel. This is, and like Born to Run, I think just kind of that perfect sound, the blend of him and the backup band, and it just works on all cylinders for me. I don't really have much to complain about it. I just like number 2 and 3 more, but I think this is just a tremendous album. And, you know, when critics fall in love with an album and you kind of got pressure to follow up with it, it's hard. We might talk about that a little later, but this is a really good version of it. Darkness on the Edge of Town, number 3.
Okay, for my number 3, I got Born in the USA. And I had this lower at first, and it kind of rose up after a couple listens. I've never liked Born in the USA, the song, that much. I don't really like the keyboard synth sound to it. And the way it's kind of been taken over as like this jingoistic, overly patriotic song. No, I don't like that because it's obviously not. If you listen to the lyrics, and I'm sure our audience kind of understands that, but it is kind of one of those things that has been kind of taken over. But title track notwithstanding, the rest of the album is just great. There's a nice mix of kind of that hard rockin' sound that you get on Darkness on the Edge of Town. And something like Cover Me is a great guitar solo, which few and far between for Bruce, but when he does it, it's actually pretty good. And then, you know, the side 2 with Glory Days, Dancing in the Dark, I'm Going Down, all just really strong songs. There's no weak tracks on here. I'm on Fire, kind of maybe sort of, you know, a different style for him, maybe sort of in the manner of something like Candy's Room, you know, real kind of stripped down, just him, just real kind of powerful emotion. And even the kind of the Heartland stuff, the Darlington County and Working on the Highway, Downbound Train, I think works well. A really nice mix of kind of the big hits and the sort of country heartland rock and sound. It's not too long. It's, you know, it's just a really strong effort. Great album.
My top 3 are all the Bruce Springsteen records that I consider really good. If this is my favorite era, they're all consecutive. If you're got the process of elimination going in your head and know what I have left, I think his writing is the best on these 3 records. I think his arrangements are the best. I think the band performances are the best on these records. And I especially think that his vocals are the best on these 3 records. He's singing loud and open, and he doesn't sound like his teeth are grinding while he's singing. So easily my 3 favorite. But in the 3 spot, I'm going with The River. You know, all of those things that I just said apply to this record. But I think of the 3, I think the production on this one is the weakest. It's a little bit thin sounding, and there are certain songs on the record that sort of sound similar to one another. I don't necessarily think it needed to be a double album. He probably could have trimmed the fat a little bit and made it a little bit of a stronger single record. But with that said, a lot of really good songs, some of his best, and yeah, I think it's great.
The River is going to be my number 2. I think this is first really more just kind of a bit more traditional melodic songwriting here. Really catchy hooks. I don't think it's too long, and I think if you look at each of the 4 sides, they're kind of laid out perfectly. Like side 1 starting with The Ties That Bind, stop and ending with Independence Day, and then side 2 brings it back up with Hungry Heart, ends with The River, and it just all works really well. I disagree. I think this is maybe his best production album. I like how it's a bit prettier, a bit more glistening, a bit shinier, a bit shimmerier. Really good scope and sprawling kind of, it's like him just kind of like, you're inside his mind and it's like, this is my idea of love in America and life, and come on, let's go for a walk. It's just like a big like Disney World of Bruce character and style. You know, you've got something like Cadillac Ranch where he's kind of doing that old, you know, like Orbison throwback. River with the harmonica is awesome. Got those big band E Street like sing along, catchy tunes like Sherry Darling or The Ties That Bind. Favorite song on it's got to be Stolen Car. I think that song is just fantastic. And I agree. I think these three, and looks like me and Jason have the same top three, not in the same order, but I think this is his best vocal album. I think it's just a little bit brighter, there's a little bit more reverb, and I don't think he's ever sounded better. Good call on the grinding his teeth thing. Like those later albums, when he's doing that mixed with like this suddenly adopted, like Dakota accent or whatever the hell he's doing there. And forgot to mention on The Rising, I think there's like 4 songs where he talks about lips and he says it lips. It's just really bizarre. And I just very much prefer his real voice. I'm not going to go off too much of a tangent on that. I love The River. It's one of my favorite albums ever. Not a bad song on it. Not anything less than a really good song to me. I think it's great.
My number 2. Well, there's only 2 albums left, and my number 1's pretty much untouchable. So number 2 is nearly as good, though. It's one heck of a follow-up. Darkness on the Edge of Town, kind of the same feel of Born to Run, maybe a little more kind of ferocious, a little harder rocking. Badlands kind of continues that epic style that he established on Born to Run. But then something like Adam Raised a Cain is real kind of just ferociously hard, just kind of screaming his lungs out. And there's some real nice guitar on this album. Badlands, Candy's Room, Prove It All Night, kind of bust that out as not something he really did that much on his first 3 albums, but when he wants to kind of throw together a hard-edged solo, Bruce can do it. I wish he would do a little more often, maybe on later stuff. There's a really nice kind of mix of that really hard rock here. But then he has, that longer, elegant storytelling on, Racing the Street and The Promised Land, Darkness on the Edge of Town. I think it's probably his, I don't know, maybe not most consistent. Maybe it is most consistent. I'm going to say it is his most consistently kind of perfect album. I think it's just a kind of perfect mix of the moods of Bruce at the time. It really works. It's still, he hasn't quite moved to the heartland yet. He's still kind of in New Jersey. He's near New York. He's near the big city, but he's still kind of on the outside looking in. And it's just a really kind of classic meditation on that, I guess. It's a really great album. His lyrics, the music, I think it all really comes together well on Darkness on the Edge of Town.
All right. Well, is it going to be a triple crown? No. My number 2 is Born to Run. Really like it. I think the songs are light years ahead of his first 2 records on this record. The arrangements are awesome, very Spector-esque, with the E Street Band. You got the piano pounding away and the glockenspiel. And I love the way the record sounds, and I think the songs are great. It was neck and neck, but I do think I like Darkness a little bit more, and I will get into why when we get there.
Was hopeful for the Triple Crown, but had a feeling it wasn't going to happen. I didn't think Darkness would be the one to win it for you. I thought you were going to be all over Nebraska, to be honest. But Born to Run, number 1 for me, very easy. There are very few albums on this earth I like more. So it was a no-brainer. I think it's just perfect all the way through. There's not a song that's below an A grade. I even like Meeting Across the River, which is the one that he doesn't really do live very often, but I know Joe loves Thunder Road, one of his favorite songs ever. It's awesome. It's relentlessly just builds into this positive vibe and then takes a deep breath, and then here comes the sax. It's fantastic. I don't know which half of the album I like more. I'm kind of day to day on that, but I mean, the whole album is just this big, just drama. It plays to me just like a big drama, like of just romance and hardships and like blue collar, just American life. And it's realistic, but hopeful and positive. It's like the American dream, just a realistic idea of the American dream stuffed into an album. And Jason's right. It sounds amazing. The band, I think, like I was saying in the album before this, is just too cut loose. I think now that they're kind of on a leash and there's a narrow focus and it's all about the arrangements and not necessarily the playing, that I think they just nailed it. And the production on it is great. I got nothing bad to say about it. It's awesome. I think I'd talk a little bit more an album of the year 1975 because it was my winner, but I mean, it's a no-brainer for me. It's got to be Born to Run.
I feel bad about leaving this off my 1975 list because Born to Run is just, I don't know, it's so good. It's a perfect album, like Kramzer said. Thunder Road one of my all-time favorites, if not my favorite song. I think it's one of the best written songs of all time. I think the lyrics are some of the best lyrics of all time. Everything about it, the piano intro, it's a perfect album opener. And I actually wrote a short story in college. It was the night before it was due. I don't think I had started it yet. And I basically just listened to Thunder Road the entire night and wrote the story. And it wasn't great. It wasn't as good as Thunder Road, but I think it got a B+. But it was just the feeling I got from listening to that song kind of over and over. And if I could kind of channel that into my writing. So that probably tells you as much as you need to know about that song, the way it has felt and shaped me. But the rest of the album, I kind of like what Kramzer was saying. It almost feels like sequenced perfectly in sort of, I don't like maybe like a musical even, like these are kind of just the way it's supposed to be. Like you have to listen to it straight through in this order, and it tells a story. Born to Run, just phenomenal, triumphant, everything that it's cracked up to be, it is. But the other songs, Night, Backstreets, She's the One, I really like Beating Across the River. It's kind of a completely different tonal, kind of the muted horn, and then the epic closer of Jungle Land. It's a great album. It's everything that Bruce was kind of building up to be from his first two albums. He just nails on this one, and it's one of the all-time greats for a reason. Iconic in every way, from the album cover to the songs. So yeah, it's a great Bruce album, and I'm not surprised Jason doesn't have it as number one because he likes to go against the grain, but I think it's pretty clearly his best work.
I obviously disagree, but I don't know if this argument's going to make any sense, but the way I see Born to Run is like these amazing arrangements, and the band playing is kind of like what that album's all about. And the fact that the songs are also good is kind of just like a cherry on top. And I see Darkness as the other way around. Like the songs are what you're there for. And the fact that the record sounds great and the band is playing really well is the cherry on top. I think the mix on Darkness is better. I think the low end on that record sounds really, really good. And I don't know, I like the songs better, honestly. The back half of the record, I think, is the best Bruce ever was. Side B of Darkness is perfect.
I understand. It makes sense because I know you. It's just wrong. I mean, the songwriting on Born to Run is ridiculous. The lyrics on Born to Run are fantastic on every song. So
I think you can say, I'm not saying that the songs are not good, but I'm saying that that's like a bonus to the arrangements, which are kind of stealing the show a little bit. And I think it's reversed on Darkness.
Okay.
Which I prefer. I prefer the arrangements. I mean, that's why I'm there for Bruce, sort of the whole epic feel. For me, the lyrics is kind of a secondary thing that helps. But I mean, I wouldn't need lyrics. He could be saying mumbo jumbo on Thunder Road, and I would still absolutely be in love with the song.
He's absolutely capable of some just god awful lyrics. 57 channels. I can't get that song out of my head, unfortunately. It's God, man. If our viewers haven't heard that song, don't. Just don't.
Yeah, not a good one. Yeah, there you have it. Bruce, I think, I don't know, you guys obviously like Bruce a lot more than I do. I think even Born to Run and Darkness are probably like, they're probably not even A+ records for me. Probably A's or A-, even his best work. So I don't know, we're coming from a different place, I guess, but that's fine.
You did better than I thought you would.
I restrained myself a bit. But yeah, let us know your favorite Bruce Springsteen records down in the comments. I think it'll be especially interesting to see on this listography what everyone thinks, because I think, like we said, there's a wide variety of opinions as far as Bruce goes. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so that you get notified when our new videos come out, and we will see you tomorrow doing our top 10 Bruce Springsteen songs. Gonna be a good one. See you there.